We will find those who did it, and we'll bring them to justice.
To understand the most hunted man of the 21st century, we must first go back, long before terror, war, and global headlines, to a boy born into extreme wealth, rigid faith, and a storm of contradictions. Osama bin Mohammed bin Awad bin Laden was born in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in 1957. One of over 50 children from a single tycoon, Mohammed bin Laden, the Yemeni-born construction billionaire whose company built the kingdom's most sacred sites. His mother, Alia Ghanem, was of Syrian origin. Young, educated, and considered an outsider by the rest of the bin Laden family, Osama was her only child. Osama's childhood was not normal. Despite unimaginable wealth, private tutors, elite access, and the favor of the Saudi royal family, his life was shaped by two forces: isolation and ideology. His father died in a plane crash when Osama was just 10, but even before that, he was being raised under strict religious discipline, absorbing Wahhabi teachings, deeply, completely. At King Abdulaziz University, Osama was drawn to fiery professors like Abdullah Azzam, men who preached defensive jihad, who said Muslims had a duty to fight injustice, by sword if necessary.
نحن إرهابيون والإرهاب فريضة في الكتاب ليعلم الغرب والشرق أننا إرهابيون وأننا مرعبون وأعدوا لهم ما استطعتم من قوة ومن رباط الخيل ترهبون به عدو الله وعدوكم فالإرهاب فريضة في دين الله.
By age 21, Osama bin Laden had money, influence, and a cause. When the Soviets invaded Afghanistan in 1979, he didn't hesitate. He packed his bags and left behind the palaces of Saudi Arabia for the cold mountains of Peshawar. The Afghan war changed him. He wasn't just another rich Arab funding rebels. He was there in the dirt, building roads, hauling supplies, sharing fire with wounded men. And that's where the base, al-Qaeda, began, not as a terrorist cell, but as a brotherhood forged in blood, in faith, and in the ruins of Soviet armor. But this was only the beginning. The boy was gone, the ghost was rising. In 1979, the Cold War reached the jagged cliffs of Afghanistan. The Soviet Union invaded, but what looked like a regional conflict would birth something darker. The age of the global jihad. Bin Laden saw this as more than a war, it was destiny. He moved to Peshawar, Pakistan, a city that became the spiritual and logistical hub of the Mujahideen. There, he connected with Sheikh Abdullah Azzam, the Palestinian cleric whose voice inspired thousands. Azzam was fire and scripture. Bin Laden was money and quiet charisma. Together, they formed Maktab al-Khidamat, the Services Bureau. It wasn't a fighting force yet. It was something far more dangerous, a machine to funnel weapons, funds, and fighters from across the Islamic world. He didn't just fund the jihad, he lived it. Bin Laden entered combat in 1986, near Jaji in Paktia province. He dug trenches, built bunkers, and endured Soviet air raids alongside men who would later call him Emir. His legend began to grow. One Saudi fighter wrote, "He had the patience of a prophet." As the war dragged on, bin Laden grew disillusioned with the Arab governments, especially his own in Saudi Arabia. They sent funds, but not men. They prayed for jihad, but didn't bleed for it. By 1988, a new idea took shape. A base, an organization, not just for Afghanistan, but for the future. Azzam disagreed. He wanted unity, peace. Bin Laden wanted revolution. A power struggle began. By the end of that year, Azzam was dead, killed in a car bombing. No one claimed responsibility. Bin Laden had now tasted war, power, and fame, but what he'd seen in Afghanistan would come to haunt him. He saw the United States of America as the enemy behind every curtain, from CIA involvement in the region to foreign military bases in Muslim lands. In his eyes, the Arab world had become a puppet show, and the puppeteer was America. In 1989, the Soviets retreated. The jihad, it seemed, was victorious. Bin Laden returned to Saudi Arabia, hailed by some as a hero, but in his soul, peace had no place. He had a new vision, a global Islamic revolution led by a stateless army, an army with no borders, no flag, just a cause. He called it al-Qaeda. The Cold War ended, but for Osama bin Laden, a new war had begun. This one, he believed, would never end until the USA and the West left Muslim lands and puppet regimes were dismantled. In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. The US responded by placing troops in Saudi Arabia, home of Mecca and Medina. Bin Laden pleaded with the royal family, "Don't let the Americans in, let us defend the land of the Prophet." They ignored him. That betrayal solidified his transformation from jihadist commander to global revolutionary. His criticism of the Saudi monarchy intensified. He accused them of selling the Ummah for oil money. In 1991, under pressure, he was exiled to Sudan, a country ruled by Islamists who welcomed him. Here, al-Qaeda evolved, no longer a brotherhood, now an enterprise, structured, secretive, global. In Sudan, he created farms, construction companies, and a shadow financial system. Al-Qaeda became a hydra, tentacles reaching Afghanistan, Yemen, Bosnia, Somalia, and even the US. He forged alliances with terror groups, Egyptian Islamic Jihad, Abu Sayyaf, Algerian GIA, and he funded training camps where recruits studied bombs and ideology alike. Then came his most audacious step, a fatwa, a religious ruling. In 1996, he declared jihad against America, calling on Muslims to kill US soldiers wherever they were. A year later, in 1998, he escalated. A second fatwa, signed by multiple jihadi leaders, declared war on all American civilians. It was no longer just politics. This was war, blessed by scripture. August 7th, 1998. US embassies in Kenya and Tanzania explode. More than 200 killed, thousands injured. It was al-Qaeda's signature, coordinated, symbolic, and utterly ruthless. The world knew his name now. America responded with cruise missiles striking an al-Qaeda camp in Khost and a pharmaceutical factory in Sudan, one they suspected was producing chemical weapons. Bin Laden survived, but now he was being hunted. He returned to Afghanistan in 1996, now under the rule of the Taliban. In exchange for funds and loyalty, they gave him sanctuary. His network grew bolder. In 2000, the USS Cole was bombed in Yemen. 17 US sailors dead. America investigated. But still, they underestimated the man in the mountains. By 2001, Osama bin Laden was ready. The plan had been in motion for years. His men were in America, learning to fly but not to land. He had declared war, and on September 11th, 2001, the world would finally understand what that meant. September 11th, 2001, 19 men, 4 planes, 2,977 victims. In the span of 102 minutes, Osama bin Laden became the most wanted man in the world. But the operation wasn't improvised. It was a masterpiece of terror, planned with chilling precision over years. The first plane struck the North Tower at 8:46 a.m. At first, confusion, a tragic accident, a small plane. At 9:03, the second tower was hit. The illusion shattered. America was under attack. The Pentagon was next, then Flight 93, brought down by its passengers in Pennsylvania. It was meant for the capital. The Twin Towers collapsed. New York was shrouded in smoke. The world was paralyzed, and al-Qaeda had made history through horror. Bin Laden had struck America's heart, symbolically and literally. The economy, the military, the government. He had wounded the empire. Within hours, al-Qaeda was the prime suspect. By September 12th, the world was pointing to Osama bin Laden, operating from his sanctuary in Afghanistan. He initially denied involvement, but praised the attack. Days later, intelligence intercepted chatter between al-Qaeda operatives. They were celebrating. The Taliban refused to hand him over without evidence. The US gave them an ultimatum. When it was ignored, Operation Enduring Freedom was launched. And so, the war on terror began. Osama bin Laden had awakened a giant. and the hunt for him would become the most expensive manhunt in human history. But even in the rubble of Tora Bora, as missiles rained down, the ghost of Bin Laden slipped away. Where was he? How had he vanished? And what would it take to find him? When the dust settled in Tora Bora, the world believed Osama Bin Laden was dead. He wasn't. He had vanished into the mountains of Pakistan, or so the rumors said. For a decade, he became the ghost of American nightmares. His voice returned in audio and videotapes, taunting presidents, celebrating terror attacks, reminding the world, "I'm still here." Al-Qaeda evolved, becoming a franchise. Iraq, Yemen, the Maghreb, even Europe, all bore the signature of Bin Laden's ideology. But the man himself remained hidden. The CIA devoted an entire department to finding him, billions of dollars, satellites, spy drones, agents, and yet nothing until 2007, when a name emerged. Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti, Bin Laden's trusted courier. Years of wiretapping, human intel, and surveillance led to one location, Abbottabad, Pakistan, a mysterious compound with 18-foot-high walls, no phone lines, and a man known only as the Pacer, who never left. It was 2010. After nearly 10 years, the CIA believed they'd found him. President Obama faced a decision: strike from the sky and risk destroying the evidence, or send in boots, quietly, surgically. It was just after 11 p.m. in Pakistan. The quiet military garrison town of Abbottabad slept under a moonless sky. But hundreds of miles away in Jalalabad, Afghanistan, 2 stealth-modified Black Hawk helicopters lifted off, carrying the world's most elite unit, SEAL Team 6, DevGru. No Pakistani radar detected them. Low-altitude flying, terrain masking. They crossed the border under complete radio silence. On board, 23 men. The pilot well aware this was a one-way mission if it failed. But they weren't alone. A backup Chinook helicopter waited across the border in case of failure. At 12:30 a.m. Pakistan time, the first helicopter reached the compound, but the unthinkable happened. The Black Hawk lost lift, likely due to hot and high conditions, and crash-landed inside the compound. It didn't explode. The mission nearly failed in its first minute, but the SEALs adapted. Explosives breached the outer walls. The element of surprise was lost, but their precision remained. Room by room, floor by floor, first the courtyard, then the guest house where Bin Laden's courier Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti was killed. Inside, his brother and one of Bin Laden's sons also neutralized. Women and children were corralled. No hostages were taken. SEALs pushed up the stairs, clearing rooms. Then they reached the 3rd floor. The target was in a darkened bedroom, wearing a long white robe. Osama Bin Laden. He peeked out, then retreated. One of his wives rushed forward. She was shot in the leg and pulled away. The SEAL raised his rifle. In less than a second, Bin Laden was shot twice, one in the chest and one above the left eye. He dropped instantly. In Langley, a CIA officer said the words, "For God and country, Geronimo EKIA, Geronimo, enemy killed in action." The SEALs confirmed the identity with facial recognition software and took DNA swabs from the corpse. His body was bagged. Computers, hard drives, flash disks, everything was collected. But they had a problem. A Black Hawk was dead.